Let's speak now to a Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the University of the Western Cape, Prof Bheki Mngomezulu. Thank you very much indeed for your time. We really do appreciate it here on the program. I hoped that we could start off with the festivities this morning and exactly what is taking place Kwakhangelamankengane, but it seems there is more drama on the cards. It looks like an interdict is being sought in the Pietermaritzburg High Court at this particular hour.
No, thank you very much, Crisalda, and good morning to your viewers. This is what you get when you mix a culture that is African tradition and customs and you mix it with Western cultures. We are bound to get this kind of conflict whereby the two don't mix. Ordinarily, whenever a king is passed on, the family will then decide who the next king will be. And that has nothing to do with the courts, and it has nothing to do with government. But then because we are living under the current political dispensation, those processes then are brought together. But we have just seen what the result is, because on the one hand, we have a cultural event that is taking place, and then on the other hand, we have a legal process that is looming. And this is not supposed to be happening, because will or no will, the reality of the matter is the family has to decide who the next heir to the throne will be. So basically, that is the situation we are faced with. Unfortunately, we cannot do anything about it, because we cannot say to people, you must not go to court because you are an African, stick to your African values, because people are embracing both. It is African tradition and modernity.
Maybe I can come in there. Then how do you draw the line between cultural practices and government processes?
No, it's clear, Crisalda. If you are an African, your first point of departure will be your African values. Maintain your African value system, and then you can borrow from the West to try and understand how things work in a broader perspective. So the point of departure here is that is why I'm saying that will or no will, the reality of the matter is the family of the royal family has to decide who the next heir to the throne should be. And then if there is an instance whereby there is disagreement among members of the family, you then talk to your traditional leaders in the area, and then later on, then you'll bring in your government processes, because we are living in a democracy whereby the constitution is the supreme law. So that is basically what brings us together. But the reality of the matter is, as an African, your first point of departure will be your African values. And in this case, the identification of the king, the next king, the heir to the throne, should not be decided by a court of law, but it should be decided by the family. In this case, what I'm hearing is that the case that is now pending is basically based on the will of the late king and whether the signature is authentic or if it was forged. That is neither here nor there, and it has no bearing on the coronation of the king, that is King Misuzulu, as the king of the Zulu nation, because you must look at how he was born, first and foremost, and then secondly, how he was nominated following the demise of the late king, King kaZwelithini, Zulu. Then once we have satisfied those cultural practices and customs, then you are covered. Then go on with the traditional process. Then if people feel aggrieved, they can still go to court. It's fine, it's their right to do so, but they should not tamper with the cultural processes that are underway at the moment.
Prof, Ukungena Esibayeni. Let's talk about the significance of it.
Thank you very much for that question, Crisalda. That's a very significant Zulu custom. In fact, African custom, I would say. What it means, maybe let me start off by saying that not all African kings and not all Zulu kings had the opportunity to enter the kraal because of circumstances that prevailed at those particular times, including, of course, the late king, King Shaka, who built the Zulu nation, always are credited for having built the Zulu nation. But the meaning of entering the kraal basically means that the first thing that happens is you identify a bull that is going to be slaughtered on the day. And in fact, today, we're just seeing what is happening in the public. The reality of the matter is King Misuzulu would have slaughtered the cow yesterday, that is last night, basically introducing him to the ancestors and telling the ancestors that we now have a new king who who is going to take over from the late king, King kaZwelithini kaBheki, and we are now going to have a new king who is Misuzulu kaZwelithini kaBheki. So that's basically a way of introducing the new king to the ancestors, and also pleading with the ancestors to preside over the event that is going to happen today, making sure that there is no chaos, everything goes smoothly, and then the king is accepted by the ancestors and by the nation.
But this ceremony is not unique to South Africa as well as AmaZulu. I think it's also in Zimbabwe where you might have this kind of practice as well. Am I correct, Prof?
Historically, we know that we have good relations with countries like Zimbabwe, more especially those who reside in Matabeleland. Those are the Ndebeles who originally come from South Africa. You might have heard some of them, in fact, who were interviewed earlier this morning, indicating that their roots are traced from South Africa. And then you also have people in Tanzania. We know that they also come from here. And then we have people from Zambia, they all come from here. So the reality of the matter is, you will find a number of Zulu practices being practiced in countries, the countries that I've just mentioned, Zimbabwe or Zambia or Tanzania, because they are Zulus first and foremost. But then they to leave South Africa because at the time there were those wars, and then of course some were running away from King Shaka, and then they wanted to have their own areas which they were controlling. But the reality of the matter is, their names, their surnames, their practices are all Zulu. So most of what happens in South Africa, you will find the remnants of those practices in these countries that I've just mentioned. I've just mentioned a few, but there could be many more. But the reality of the matter is, it's not only a prerogative of the Zulu people, but it's a prerogative of Zulu people regardless of where they are. Like we normally talk of Africans who reside in South Africa, and then those who are in the diaspora. So we can look at it from that perspective.
Just 2 weeks ago, we can't have this conversation, of course, without talking about what may unfold in the Pietermaritzburg High Court. But also, there's been drama over the past couple of weeks. I think it was 2 weeks ago where we saw King Misuzulu, kaZwelithini's rival, Prince Makate Zulu, declaring himself the legitimate king of the Zulu nation. What do these rifts and, if I may, divisions within the royal family mean?
Okay, Crisalda, no, thanks for that question. No, for starters, this is not something that is unprecedented. We've seen this thing happening throughout history.
Yes.
You recall that even King Shaka was killed by his own brothers. You might also have heard that Skujana was killed by his own blood.
Correct.
And the list goes on. So the reality of the matter is, whenever there is a vacancy, a king is passed on, and then a new one is to come in, there will always be those feuds in the royal family, this house wanting to produce an heir to the throne, and this one and that one. So there is nothing wrong with that. It always happens. But then the only way to resolve that particular impulse is to draw from cultural practices. How is a king elected in the family? Because you don't vote for the king, but the family, the royal family, not even the nation, by the way, is a say in all of this. It is the royal family that decides. So what we saw with Princess Makate entering the Kraal, as it were, and there is something very interesting about that. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because when Princess Makate entered the Kraal, we didn't hear of any court interdict. The question is why? And then now when King Misuzulu is entering the Kraal, then there is a court interdict. So which means that within the royal family, they in a way admit that there are people who are claiming this position, but who don't necessarily qualify for the position, and then those who are contesting the position don't care about them anyway. So which means that the event that happened when Princess Makate entered the Kraal did not have such attraction, and there was no vibe of activity, and even the number of people who attended was relatively small. So which means that people did not take it seriously, although of course those who are in Prince Makate's corner will say that he is the right person. And then suddenly we've heard that they are even coming up with a third name, Ubuzabazi, who is also said to be the right person to ascend to the throne. So these things are bound to happen, and we shouldn't be worried about them as if they are unprecedented. They are part of our history, and they will always happen. Long after King Misuzulu is gone, they will still happen.
Well-documented history, in fact. Thank you very much indeed. Professor Bheki Mngomezulu giving us a perspective on the Zulu King Misuzulu performing a ritual called Ukungena Esibayeni.